Well, Donald Trump has won the US presidential election, which means that Kamala Harris has lost. And I don't mean to denigrate the Trump campaign in any way, because it was obviously successful, but I think it's fair to say that the campaign, as headed up by Kamala, was lacking, to say the least. In fact, overall, I would describe it as being mysterious. I'll explain what I mean by that in due course. Before I get there, let me highlight three people who I think have been fundamental to the success of the Trump campaign. Number one, in no particular order, is Joe Rogan, the world's biggest podcaster. Joe Rogan, of course, recently endorsed Trump. Make no mistake, that would have had a big impact out there. And also recently, Joe Rogan said this.
She's going to be changed, even though she's the sitting vice president. And then on top of that, this idea of change when the Democrats have been in control for, 12 of 16 years?
Right.
Which is crazy. Like, this is the change.
And of course, what he's highlighting there is this strange maneuver that Kamala and her team appeared to be trying to make, which was in essence to say, hey, it's going to be new and different and joyous and wonderful. Okay, great. But what's going to be new and different about it? Well, everything. But weren't you the vice president? Yes, but it's going to be great and wonderful and different. Could you explain how? And there we get our first hint as to what mysterious, in my opinion, may mean. Because I don't think that was ever articulated. We will come on to that, as promised. Before we get there, here's person number two, Elon Musk. And this is what Elon Musk said recently in conversation with Joe Rogan.
This election is the last chance to preserve democracy in America. Mark my words.
Wow. The last chance to preserve democracy in America. That's quite a bold and stark statement. And just like Joe Rogan, Elon Musk has huge influence, is incredibly famous. Not everyone agrees with him, of course, but that statement, that whole thing about how democracy will be destroyed if Trump isn't elected, also would have had a huge impact. And then we have person number three, J.D. Vance.
There's something very, in sort of the modern, again, this is a new thing, because this is not Bill Clinton liberalism. This is something that we're seeing today, where they don't even want to talk about the quality and the backgrounds and the skills of people coming into our country. Somehow it's fundamentally racist to say, well, we don't want certain people of certain backgrounds to be in the United States of America. No, it's just common sense. I mean, let me sort of give you a very specific example, okay? So, ask yourself, should America accept 100,000 immigrants from Mexico? Okay? Just in the abstract. Well, Mexico is a gigantic country with millions upon millions of people. Who are we talking about? Are we talking about people who speak English as a second language and don't have criminal backgrounds? Or are we talking about people who don't even read and write in Spanish and do have criminal backgrounds? Because those same groups of people, even though they come from the country we call Mexico, are going to assimilate and contribute to America's society much differently.
Now, whether you agree with J.D. Vance or not, I think what is significant here is that he had an opinion and he articulated it. And also he talked to Joe Rogan for several hours, as did Donald Trump, of course, and also as did Elon Musk. And I said only recently that I thought it was really important for politicians, for leaders, to be involved in these long-form interviews, because what do we get? We get a greater understanding of who they are. It's difficult to keep up a pretense for that length of time. And you will slip up and you will say things that you think, oh, I shouldn't have said that. But at least we know who we're dealing with. And I mentioned again the mysterious campaign of Kamala. And here was one way she could have clarified to a lot of people what she actually represented. That sidestep that I mentioned, that maneuver where she was trying to say it will all be new, even though I was part of the not new, but I can't really quite tell you how it's going to be new. Well, if she'd gone on Rogan, that may have worked in her favor. But instead, there were terms and conditions which were laid down that Joe Rogan refused, and I think quite correctly refused. So even if you disagree with J.D. Vance, at least you get some certainty about what he is considering as important issues right now. Same with Trump. They at least talked. And instead, what did Kamala do? Well, let's take a look.
Kurt
So
Anderson.
you don't think it's stupid anymore?
I think what he did and how he did it did not make much sense because he actually didn't do much of anything. I just talked about that wall, right? We just talked about it. He didn't actually do much of anything.
But you do want to build some wall.
I want to strengthen our border.
And I think it's fair to say that Anderson Cooper, who was interviewing Kamala, wasn't exactly tough. She should have been able to answer those questions, that question, relatively easily. And I think it's interesting to note what this Fox commentator says about that interview.
This is exactly why you have open primaries for candidates to debate and go against each other and have their ideas challenged. Because by the time it's time for them to get to the big boy or big girl ticket, they have their message honed in.
Yeah, she wouldn't have been their pick.
Yeah.
She would not have been their
and this is why Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama, don't forget Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi wanted an open primary process. But Joe Biden was so bitter in the way that they got rid of him that he slammed the endorsement right after that tweet that he sent. And this is what you get, an untested, an unchallenged candidate that's not prepared for prime time.
I couldn't agree more. An untested, unchallenged candidate, not ready for prime time, not ready for the big stage. This has been so apparent for so long in terms of the performance of Kamala. And I wonder if this is one of the reasons that Barack Obama appeared to be pretty angry.
And you're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that.
Barack Obama is articulate, intelligent, and charismatic. He's also normally poised. This looked like genuine irritation, essentially lecturing men, telling them what he thinks they're thinking, and subtext, how they need to think. You're just not feeling the idea of a woman as president. Maybe they're just not buying into anything that she's saying, perhaps because they can't quite understand it. Could this irritation and perhaps anger from Barack be because he didn't want Kamala as the election candidate for his party? Maybe. I don't know. But I would say to that looks a little bit suspicious. In essence, I think there's a good chance that was what was going on behind the scenes. And then we have this.
I have been fortunate and blessed to, during the course of being vice president, have many situations where it becomes clear to me that there are people of every age and gender, by the way, who see something about being the first that lets them know they don't need to be limited by other people's limited understanding of who can do what. And I think that's important. And it relates to all people.
I wouldn't necessarily call this word salad. I think there are more spectacular examples of that out there. Instead, I think this is an example of Kamala struggling to articulate what she means. And that has been a feature of the campaign, along with, of course, the word salad. In addition, she has used stories, anecdotes, laughter, and woolly, fluffy words to try and get by. Now, to be fair, these words are used by other politicians as well. These words can be things like, I'm not saying this is specifically Kamala, but they can be like better, hope, new beginning, and so on. There's no substance to them, but they can be quite emotive. The challenge is, if you use those words, you need for them to be effective to back them up with some substance. And unfortunately, maybe because she felt she had to keep on trying to distance herself from the current regime, Kamala didn't really get into substance. We don't really know, or I don't, exactly who she is, what she believes in, and what she represents. And ultimately, I think that's one of the main reasons that her campaign failed.